they don't understand. See, she's telepathic. Call it black girl magic. Yeah, she scares the government. Deja vu, what's up, man? And she don't give up. Yeah, she don't give up. She don't give up. No, she don't give up. Rosa was a freedom fighter and she taught us how to fight. Ella was a freedom fighter and she taught us how to fight. Audrey was a freedom fighter and she taught us how to fight. Angela was a freedom fighter and she taught us how to fight.
Greetings and welcome to Boston University. We will begin our program in a few minutes. At this time, we invite you to take your seats. The show is about to begin. Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Jason Campbell Foster, and I am the Interim Associate Provost and Dean of Students here at Boston University. Excuse me. Oh, on behalf of President Robert Brown and Provost Jean Morrison, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the annual celebration of the lives and legacies of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King on this very important day, Monday, January 16th, in the year of 2023, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. This is a national holiday to honor Dr. King's legacy, celebrate his teachings, and continue to remember the importance they still hold today. We are gathering back in person this year for the first time since 2020, alongside our partners at the City of Boston and the New England Conservatory. I want to thank Mayor Michelle Wu for being here today and for continuing the tradition Boston University and the City of Boston has cherished over the decades. We have also here to honor the welcomed elected officials with the City of Boston, members of our age-strong community, and to all of those who have joined us in years past. I want to thank the New England Conservatory's president, Dr. Andrea Kalin, for her partnership, as several years ago, the university looked to expand the celebration to honor Coretta Scott King, who met Martin Luther King Jr. while doing a fellowship at NEC. We honor the role she has played as a strong partner to her husband side by side in the fight for civil rights, while also using her own voice to advocate for African American equality. Thank you, President Kalin, for being here today. I have the honor to begin today's program and will be serving as one of the hosts. You will see me back here at the podium with introductions, and you will hear my voice as we transition through the program. I want all of you to know that this event is happening live, not just here in this room, but also being broadcast live with the help of Boston University Productions and Learning Events and Technology Services teams, working alongside the team at the Boston City Cable TV. Hello to all of our friends who are watching us from home. The theme of this year's King Day celebration is A New Sense of Direction, titled after one of Dr. King's last speeches before his death. Dr. King's A New Sense of Direction served as his assessment of the civil rights movement, showcased his keen understanding of younger generations, and communicated his strategic vision for the future of the movement. In 2023, his words still serve as a relevant call to action. While we have made progress in notable ways, the fight for racial, urban, and economic justice continues to be as germane as it was 55 years ago. As a university, we believe in the power and capacity of people to represent and stand for change, as Dr. King did, and will use this opportunity to reflect on his legacy and inspire us to be active and engaged participants in the quest for a more equitable present and future. I now have the pleasure of introducing our first musical selection. We will hear a piece titled ER001.1b, composed and performed by Lemuel Mark, accompanied by William Mabuza on the double bass. Both are students at the New England Conservatory. Please join me in welcoming them. Thank you for sharing that remarkable piece with us. It is my pleasure to welcome Andrea Taylor as our next speaker. Andrea is the Senior Diversity Officer here at Boston University. In this role, she chairs the university's Anti-Racism Working Group and its Community Safety Advisory Group. Andrea connects and supports a range of diversity, equity, and inclusion activities across BU's campuses, including those being undertaken by the Board of Trustees Committee on Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, and the university's individual schools and colleges, the Dean of Students Office, Enrollment and Student Administration, and the Office of Community and Inclusion in the Provost's Office. Join me in welcoming Andrea Taylor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and welcome to everyone joining us in person and via live stream to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I want to extend a special welcome to our guest, Mayor Michelle Wu. As you've heard, my name is Andrea Taylor and I am the Senior Diversity Officer at Boston University. Today marks the 37th annual celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. And this year's commemoration is also a celebration of the Embrace sculpture that was recently installed in the Boston Commons, honoring Dr. King and his wife Coretta in the city where the two civil rights leaders began their life together. On behalf of the Boston University community, we are pleased to join in this special celebration of his leadership and legacy. 2023 also marks the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where Dr. King made his famous "I Have a Dream" speech that attracted more than 250,000 Americans in a peaceful protest against discrimination. It is a memorable event in American history and a pivotal moment in the civil rights movement. The message of this movement is still pertinent today as the nation continues to grapple with issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Parenthetically, I was there at the March on Washington in 1963 as a teenager. And I wonder if there's anyone else in this room who may have been at that event. I see here. Is there anyone else here? So there are still people alive and well and witnesses. And sadly, we're still working on the same issues all these years later. So we need to keep at it and keep going and try to move forward. I was also accompanied, I might add, by two other BU alums, and my mother, who is an alum of the College of Fine Arts in the 40s, and my uncle, who is a lawyer with 2 law degrees in the 30s, who organized our trip from Charleston, West Virginia to the march. So it's an indelible memory for me and for many of you as well. So today we are delighted to be here to celebrate the important and influential history of this institution and its distinguished alum, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who came to BU in 1951 and became Dr. King by earning a PhD in systematic theology in 1955. The time that he spent at BU and Boston broadly was transformative for him and for the city of Boston. We are honored and humbled to continue celebrating his legacy. His message and the work he began are still necessary and relevant, not only in this country, but around the world. And it is now my distinct privilege to introduce our next speaker, Mayor Michelle Wu, whom we're delighted to welcome back to our campus. Mayor Wu is the first woman and the first person of color to serve as mayor of the city of Boston. She's the daughter of immigrants, a Boston Public Schools mom, an MBTA commuter, and a fierce believer that we can solve our deepest challenges through building community. As mayor, Michelle Wu is working in coalition to deliver bold, systemic change and make Boston a city for everyone. Mayor Wu has been a voice for accessibility, transparency, and community engagement in city leadership. She first was elected to the Boston City Council at the age of 28 in 2013, and she's the first Asian American woman to serve on the council by her as the council president, selected by her colleagues in a unanimous vote. Mayor Wu graduated from Harvard College and Harvard Law School, and she is fluent in Mandarin and Spanish. She lives in Roslindale with her husband Connor and her two sons, Blaze and Cass. It is my privilege to welcome warmly Boston's Mayor Wu. Mayor Wu.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a blessing to be with all of you today in this amazing city on this weekend where we have really added another bit of living history to our midst. This room is already filled with living legends and those who for decades have been bending that arc just a little bit more so that the next generation and the next generation can add to the foundation we've been building. I want to thank everyone at the Howard Thurman Center, Ms. Taylor, and everyone on her team and in the Office of the Senior Diversity Officer and New England Conservatory for partnering with us to honor Dr. King, Ms. Coretta Scott King, and their rich legacies. This is truly a joy for the city of Boston to have so many deeply rooted partnerships that help shape what's ahead for our residents. And I know that several of our departments in particular have really been part of today's event. I want to thank and recognize our Age Strong Commissioner, Commissioner Emily Shea. Thank you for all that you do day in and day out for the city of Boston. She's sitting right next to our Chief of Housing, Sheila Dillon, for whom there is never an issue too small or too big. And we both share an urgency in that the issue of our day in our city in terms of equity and fairness and who has a shot is centered in the question of who can afford to live here and who can thrive in that housing. We're also joined by our Chief of Economic Opportunity and Inclusion, Shugun Itawu. Thank you for all that you do to keep our city growing and thriving. And there are many, many other departments and agencies represented. I see our Deputy Chief of the Fire Department and many others who are here. And I want to thank, I know there's been a change in the program. Someone mercifully made it so that I did not have to follow our poet laureate for the city of Boston, Portia Olayiwola, who is truly the embodiment of the voice and the soul of our city as we reach for our greatest possibility. So I look forward to be sitting right there when you're speaking and not having to worry about what I'm going to say next. Just last week, many of us watched as, it'll flash up soon, this beautiful, powerful new monument, Embrace Boston, was unveiled. It's a sculpture that embodies the love that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Ms. Coretta Scott King shared, and the role that this city had to play in that important connection and relationship, and in so many that have given birth to the direction of this country. We talked at that event, much as the Kings did, of the importance of love, compassion, and understanding, the urgency to keep that going today, but also about how their greatest impact and ours comes when we work together, when they leaned on each other and refined their strategies, their philosophies, their approach to this work, when their love was able to surround and embrace and empower so many others working alongside. This was truly a collaboration that actually the world so narrowly missed out on, if not for some of the institutions represented here today. These two important leaders found each other because Coretta happened to know Miss Mary Powell through the New England Conservatory. And because Miss Powell knew Dr. King through her work at the historic 12th Baptist Church, and because Mary decided to bring these two students together. I don't know later in her life if she realized, and if her descendants are fully realizing the mark that one single connection, that her act of bringing people together in love made on the direction of our history. Mary brought these two together here in Boston, and all of us across the city are committed to this day to ushering in the world that the Kings demanded and called for. A world rooted in community, filled with people dedicated to maintaining and embracing that community. We already see the ways in which Boston has over the decades worked to live up to that ideal. In the community centers that tie our neighborhoods together, often leading the country for new innovations, like the first community health centers anywhere in the United States, or ways in which we were tying together school and community and after school and multi-generational spaces. We've been proud to open new senior centers in the city of Boston over this last year. We also see it in our city in the connections that we can forge over the fierce bond and loyalty that we all have to being Bostonians. A debate about our sports teams on the bus, or in my case, trying to talk to someone on the T and not having anyone reciprocate because it is not considered a space where you're supposed to have pleasant conversation, but a Midwesterner at heart, I will continue to try. And in the young people all across our city who continue to lead the way. In his remarks, in that speech, A New Sense of Direction, Dr. King celebrated the youth of his time, the folks that we today might call our elders. He said that these young people were in spiritual ferment. He spoke of the urgency of bringing them together, whether they were stout radicals or already aligned with principles of love and nonviolence. He was asking his colleagues in that speech at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to meet our young people where they are. He believed in the unique perspective that young people have. And in his generation, that had meant growing up in the midst of the civil rights movement, witnessing the seemingly unstoppable force of systemic racism and violence come crashing against the immovable will and power of love and nonviolence. He spoke of the need to, quote, welcome the work and insights of these young people, from the pacifists to the radicals, to help the movement and its core philosophies evolve and grow. In some ways, today, our young people are raised in a similar climate of urgency, struggle, and awareness. The fights for racial justice and economic justice remain as urgent as ever. And today, we are open and unabashed about the fights for gender and queer justice, climate justice, and reproductive justice. These are all raging around us. In some ways, it can feel daunting, like we haven't made enough progress, that there's so much to do day by day. But we know that progress is not linear, and that it takes compassion, patience, love, and perseverance to achieve and persevere in that progress. In A New Sense of Direction, Dr. King compared the back and forth of struggle and progress to a plane trip he once took, saying that there are times when the tailwinds of triumph and fulfillment favor us, and other times when strong headwinds of disappointment and setbacks beat against us relentlessly. We in Boston are blessed that we have seen over the course of our nearly 4 centuries of history and legacy of activism that those tailwinds can carry us forward more than push us back when we stay united in the struggle. And our city reminds us that no matter how much work we do, the labor of love that is our pursuit and maintenance of equity and equality is never truly done. And that we can only achieve a lasting impact by welcoming all of our young people, and you'll get to hear from 2 very special young people later in this program, Kiara and Gloria, thank you, to join us in this work. We are marking 6 decades since the March on Washington, and sometimes it's said that history can be cycles. When you turn on the TV today, when you listen to the news, there's an overwhelming feeling that we have so much in front of us. The headwinds are quite stiff. But I like to remember that in this city, we have proven our mettle when we've been here before. The Embrace Memorial, the living legends, the names that are on some of our most important community spaces, Thelma Burns, Melnia Cass Boulevard. These are names that remind us of what we are capable of, what we have already done together. And I'm sure that with the energy and the determination of our city in this moment, that we will do our part in crafting that next foundation for generations to come to build on. When I started in politics, about a little over 10 years ago, I walked into the door of City Hall for an internship with then Mayor Menino. I felt, in many ways, completely small in that space, maybe not ready for the gravity of the responsibility ahead, but Mayor Menino had such a way of zooming right in, of taking the big, hard issues down to what that meant for every single resident outside their doorstep, for every family across each and every one of our neighborhoods. And with his example, with his dedication, I was able to see a space for myself to be seen in our city government. Today we're in a moment where not everyone feels seen by our democracy, by our communities, even by our neighbors, a space where the bonds and relationships of trust and neighborly connection have frayed in many parts of the world and the country. When we're called in these moments of history to choose between going forward and trying our best to repair and rebuild, or sitting back and letting someone else try to figure it out, it is the way of this city to charge forward and ahead. I believe that is at the kernel of a little bit, as we heard from Martin Luther King III at the ceremonies over the week, a few days ago, that it is a bit at the kernel of both the choices of Dr. King and Ms. Coretta Scott to find their way to Boston because of what our city represented. In the movements for freedom, for abolition, for marriage equality, for civil rights, and climate justice, and all that is in front of us today, this city has shown that when we dig into our deepest selves and embrace what is possible, when we keep our eyes trained on the horizon, not just for what feels convenient in the moment, but what the next generation truly deserves, that is how we tap into our reserves to do more and to do so right now. And so I ask for everyone in this room and all across our city for your continued partnership, for your continued compassion, for your continued love, as we really strive to show that more is possible in this moment, and that at the city level, Boston can do it better, Boston can do it differently, and Boston can truly be a city for everyone. Thank you so much, and thank you for celebrating with us today.
Thank you, Mayor Wu, for joining us today. It is my honor to welcome the City of Boston's Poet Laureate to the stage, Portia Olayiwola. A Jamaica Plain resident, Portia is the artistic director at Mass Leap, a literary nonprofit organization in Massachusetts serving youth artists. She has also co-founded the House Slam, a poetry slam venue at the Haley House Bakery Cafe in Roxbury that offers a free poetry slam and open mic events twice a month. Portia is the 2014 Individual World Poetry Slam Champion and the 2015 National Poetry Slam Champion. In 2018, she was named by GK 100 as one of Boston's most influential people of color. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our Poet Laureate.
Good afternoon, folks. How are y'all? Good. I'm so excited to be here, so humbled to be here, and thinking and honoring the memory of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Oftentimes, I like to think of Dr. King as an Afrofuturist, right? Adrienne Marie Brown says all organizing is science fiction, right? And I think about I have a dream, right? And the idea that all change or implementation of change starts with a dream, so to speak, right? And then I've been thinking about this, the idea of Dr. King as an Afrofuturist, alongside this year's theme, a new sense of direction. More specifically, I was thinking about Dr. King when he was in the civil rights movement, and more specifically in the Birmingham jails, and how during the civil rights movement, folks tried to use the jail systems to jail the movement, if you will. And a lot of adults were being thrown into jails, which kind of halted the movement a bit. And one of the leaders had the idea that maybe we should use young people or children or take on a new sense of direction, if you will. Dr. King was reluctant about it, mostly because we know the narrative of Bull Connors and the dogs and the water hoses that he brought out and the violence that he named as a necessary component. In any case, they chose to use young people so that it would dismantle the jail system as we knew it, and that the movement could continue because they can no longer jail folks anymore. This poem is about that, is about the Children's March of 1963, and thinking again about a new sense of direction. If folks are boxed in, how do we change? How do we shift? And oftentimes we think about our future, right? And our young people and our children and futurism, if you will, if you're following. So this poem entangles the violence of the Children's March with the folklore of the Flying Africans. It begins with an epigraph from the Federal Writers Project that reads, "My gran used to tell me about folks flying back to Africa. A man and his wife was brung from Africa. When they found out they were slaves and got treated so bad, they just fret and fret. One day, they was standing with some other slaves, and all of a sudden, they say, 'We going back to Africa. So goodie bye, goodie bye.'" And that's from Moss Brown. And this is Children's March, Birmingham, Alabama, 1963. A high-pressure water hose can take the head clean off. On the curb, a pair of tinted glasses, small enough to dress a toy. In the street's middle, a pigtail, wrapped and still fastened with barrette. Sky-colored uniform, each with an arm calling to a friend and the other limb in the leaping throat of a canine. The teens skip school to crusade. Songs shrieking like squashed berries, pressed skirts, cadetting knees, patent leather Sunday shoes glinting from the fire hose and the body's leaking grief. To shield against fatal, go fetal. Huddle the black of the pavement. Muzzle the face to the red brick of a storefront, spines sprayed and pinned like a crucifixion righteous. The youngest, though, could not ground themselves with their own child weight, lighting them like feathers. See it from the window. Porcelain hoofed melancholy, waters rising them up, flapping and grimace, jetted black birds, grinning little ebony figurines soaring the sea. Kumyali, Kumbabe Tambe, my God, the children. Did you see them? Salt blood. They took flight. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Portia. We now welcome Boston University's Interim Director of the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground, Nick Bates, to the stage. Nick is an interpreter of Howard Thurman using life, work, and philosophy as a framework to engage initiatives on equality and inclusion. He has committed himself to thoroughly reading Thurman and finding ways to assist others with developing a relationship to the work of Howard and Sue Bailey Thurman. Nick is a career educator working at colleges and universities as an administrator in diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as holding multiple teaching roles during his tenure. Please join me in welcoming my colleague, Nick Bates.
So I spoke to my mom last night. She's probably watching, so hi, Mom. And she was looking at the program, and she said, "Why is it listed as Nick Bates right here?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean that's my name?" She said, "Your full name is Nicholas Bates. And so for the purpose of this, today I will be Nicholas Bates. Because I don't want to get in trouble, y'all. I really don't. In our committee meetings, we pushed for a theme that honored the radical king. There's often this tendency to sanitize Martin Luther King Jr. to only specific moments in history as if he didn't evolve, as if he didn't change his mind. So often you hear people quote from the "I Have a Dream" speech, and they talk often about the content of people's character. And while those are great words by Martin Luther King, he had other things to say. So today's theme, A Sense of a New Direction, honors last year's theme, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? It speaks at length about the things impacting blue-collar families and working-class families, which we felt is important to people in this room, but also the city of Boston. It speaks intentionally about the importance of challenging morally corrupt governments that have continued to underserve minoritized communities and disenfranchise them. It paints a picture about how urban violence, about poverty, and other systemic failures in our communities have decimated our communities and prevented the progress for all. Additionally, it acknowledges King where he was in that moment. He was coming off what he would consider some victories in Birmingham, Alabama, and the South as well, and emerging into learning and engaging northern campaigns in cities like Chicago and Cleveland as well. So we thought it was important to make sure we shared that sentiment today with you all in this MLK Day celebration. And lastly, I am going to talk about Thurman later, and I'm so excited to talk about one of Martin Luther King's teachers. However, I'll end with this quote from A Sense of New Direction, which is one of my favorites. "For the evils of racism, poverty, and militarism to die, a new set of values must be born. Our economy must become more person-centered than property and profit-centered. Our government must depend more on its moral power than its military power." Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Chiara Lamantas. Chiara is a member of Boston University's class of 2023 in the College of Arts and Sciences. She is also the president of the Iota chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. She graduated from high school from the John D. O'Brien School of Mathematics and Science in Roxbury. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Chiara.
Good afternoon. The following is an excerpt from Martin Luther King Jr.'s sermon, The Drum Major Instinct, delivered on February 4th, 1968, at the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. If any of you are around when I have to meet my day, I don't want a long funeral. And if you get somebody to deliver the eulogy, tell them not to talk too long. And every now and then, I wonder what I want them to say. Tell them not to mention that I have a Nobel Peace Prize. That isn't important. Tell them not to mention that I have 300 or 400 other awards. That's not important. Tell them not to mention where I went to school. I'd like somebody to mention that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others. I'd like for somebody to say that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. I want you to say that day that I tried to be right on the war question. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. And I want you to be able to say that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who were naked. I want you to say on that day that I did try in my life to visit those who were in prison. I want you to say that I tried to love and serve humanity. Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for righteousness, and all of the other shallow things will not matter. I won't have any money to leave behind. I won't have the fine and luxurious things of life to leave behind, but I just want to leave a committed life behind. And that's all I want to say. If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or a song. Thank you.
It is my pleasure to welcome New England Conservatory President Dr. Andrea Kalin to our program. Dr. Kalin, New England Conservatory's 17th and first female president, began her tenure in January 2019. Dr. Kalin's deep commitment to musical excellence, her strong relationship with faculty, and her profound sense of responsibility for music education are hallmarks to her exemplary leadership. Dr. Kalin is fundamentally committed to advancing the place of music in the world and to strengthening connections among composers, performers, and audiences. A trained musicologist and pianist, she holds a PhD in musicology from the Eastman School of Music, where her research centered on 20th century American music. She serves on the Board of Trustees of WGBH, the Board of Directors of the League of American Orchestras, and chairs the Pro Arts Consortium. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to President Kalin.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to join you again this year to commemorate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. This day is one not just of recognition and celebration, but also a reminder of our responsibility to continue the unfinished work of the Kings. Their lives are examples of how remarkable courage can create consequential change. They chose lives of purpose to make life better for all. That took courage, that took hope, and every day it took a leap of faith. Coretta Scott King's courage was well evident in her pursuit of education, moving beyond the limited opportunities available to her in Alabama and the discriminatory obstacles to her education in Ohio before coming to Boston in 1951 to study as a soprano at New England Conservatory, graduating with a music education degree in 1954. And it was on the steps of NEC's Jordan Hall that Coretta Scott met Martin Luther King Jr. for that first blind date that soon became the profound love story celebrated in The Embrace, the powerful sculpture unveiled Friday on Boston Common. Coretta's voice, her excellence as a singer, earned her admission to NEC. But it is how she used her voice that is so remarkable, so exceptional. She used the same voice that was central to her own education to educate America about injustice and the need for nonviolent movement to make our country more just and fair for all. She envisioned and created freedom concerts to raise money for the civil rights movement, designing her programs to weave dramatic storytelling with poetry and song. She gave more than 30 such concerts and donated all the proceeds to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Coretta Scott King continued the work with Dr. King for 14 years, traveling across America to change our country, facing racism and threats every day. And she continued that work for another 38 years after Dr. King's assassination. At NEC, we're inspired by the example Coretta Scott King set for us as musicians as well as people. When our country tried to silence her, she used her voice to change our country. On this day, we're reminded of the work that remains and our responsibility to continue it. In his speech, A New Sense of Direction, Dr. King said, Let us be those creative dissenters who will call our nation to a higher destiny, to a new plateau of compassion, to a more noble expression of humaneness. We know music can be a vehicle for that noble expression. Recently at NEC, we made a commitment to increase equitable access to music education for children in Boston. Thanks to Mayor Wu's partnership and the generosity of an anonymous donor, more children in Boston will have the opportunity to engage with music from their earliest years. We want every child to be able to use their voice in song and in life, just as Coretta Scott King did. In her 2004 commencement speech at NEC, she reminded us, your labors can help to awaken the hearts, souls, and spirits of the coming generations to greater truth, beauty, peace, and harmony, thereby advancing the coming of the beloved community. We have much work to do, and on this day that calls us to action, let us lift our voices for change. Thank you.
Next, it is my pleasure to introduce Gloria Ampadu Darko to the stage. Gloria is a member of the Boston University's College of Arts and Sciences class of 2024, serves as a student ambassador for the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground, and was a recipient of the Menino Fellowship in 2021 to 2022. Gloria.
Good afternoon, everyone. Derek L. Williams, PhD, aka Prof. D, or Blue Collar Scholar, is an activist academic, communication specialist, and experienced college student program developer. Inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. while growing up in the small coal mining town of Graysville, just outside of his birthplace of Birmingham, Alabama, he has been speaking before audiences since the age of 4. Derek comes from a humble working-class family as the great-grandson of an Alabama black belt sharecropper, grandson of a coal miner, and son of an iron worker and daycare child educator. Fostering a personal connection with students to facilitate lifelong learning stands at the center of his zeal for teaching. His educational philosophy can be summed up in a quote by Dr. King. The purpose of education, therefore, is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. As a first-generation college student, William started his educational journey at a community college and has never forgotten the professors there who inspired and influenced him. He would go on to receive his BA in Communication Studies and Psychology from Upper Iowa University, his MA in Communication Studies from the University of Northern Iowa, and his PhD in Communication Studies from Southern Illinois University at Carbondale, where his research combines studies in critical race theory and masculinity studies. At Southern Illinois University, he held affiliated faculty status in Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies, Black American Studies, Health Education, and Communication Studies departments, where he taught several courses on gender, race, class, sexuality, sports, and media. Additionally, Derek served as the Assistant Director of the Center for Inclusive Excellence at Southern Illinois University, where he assisted with the daily operations for the Black, LGBTQ, Women, and Latinx resource centers. He has 21 years of experience teaching undergraduate and graduate courses at the University of Northern Iowa, UNI, Southern Illinois University, SIU, John A. Logan College, JALC, Case Western Reserve University, CWRU, Baldwin Wallace University, and Cuyahoga Community College Metropolitan Campus, Tri-C, where he currently teaches in the Communication Studies Department as a full professor. He was recognized as a 2017 to 2018 nominee for the Outstanding Teaching Award by the Ohio Association for Two-Year Colleges. In 2019, he was awarded the Tri-C's Ralph M. Bessie Excellence in Teaching Award, in addition to being recognized by Ohio Magazine for Excellence in Education. In 2020, he received the League for Innovation in Community Colleges Teaching Excellence Award. He is involved with several innovative projects in the humanities from grade school to graduate courses. As a 2019 to 2020 recipient of the inaugural Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Humanities Faculty Fellowship, Derek designed a curriculum for K-12 students that teaches public speaking skills by examining the rhetoric of Carl B. Stokes and his historic mayoral tenure as the first Black mayor of a major U.S. city. Working closely with the Cleveland Humanities Collaborative, CHC, a partnership with Tri-C and CWRU, he has been involved with 2 CHC projects. In fall 2019 and 2020, he was selected to co-teach a graduate seminar course entitled Teaching Careers at Community Colleges, designed to give CWRU graduate students in the humanities, arts, and humanistic social sciences an introduction to community college teaching. During the summers of 2020 and 2021, he co-facilitated CHC's 3rd and 4th annual Reading Social Justice, the Ansfield Wolf Book Awards, AWBA, seminar, which attracted faculty from across the country to participate. He continues his work with AWBA as a senior mentor where Derek advises new seminar leaders. He received the Faculty Innovation Grant, FIG, for 2 consecutive years, 2019 and 2020. Awarded to the Tri-C full-time faculty to support innovative projects and to design and implement new tools to enhance instruction and increase student learning outcomes. Recently, he completed an Ohio statewide course on effective online teaching practices during spring and fall 2021, hosted by the Association of College and University Educators, ACUE, which supports his current research focused on digital disparities and educational access. In fall 2021, he was awarded the Faculty and Leadership Sustainability Award for his work integrating environmental justice issues into the classroom, as well as Ohio Association of Two-Year Colleges, OATYC, teaching grant for creating a new curriculum that addresses digital technology in communication. In summer 2022, he served one of the lead faculty in the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Youth Humanities Academies Collaboratory Teaching Seminar. As Tri-C's 2022 Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion recipient, his work with inclusion and equity remains crucial to his work on college campuses and surrounding communities. This fall, he will complete ACUE's Educator Inclusive Teaching for Equitable Learning micro course, in addition to serving as co-chair of the Roxborough Elementary's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Mentoring and literacy are passions for Derek. His community work involves coaching in the Cleveland Heights Youth Basketball Recreation League. In addition, he facilitates a community-based group called Brooks Brothers Briefings designed to promote the power of reading. Dr. Williams will take the stage to share opening remarks on the theme. Following his opening remarks, Nicholas Bates will join him in conversation related to the theme and the opening remarks. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maldrick Williams. I'm in 7th grade. I came all the way from Cleveland to share my speech with you.
Hi, I'm Ella. I'm in 3rd grade, and I go to Roxborough Elementary.
Okay, so my speech is about my curious superpower. Spider-Man spins powerful webs. Wonder Woman has incredible agility. Superman can fly. The superpower I have is just as amazing and is obtainable by anyone. It is curiosity. Instead of casting webs, you can cast very important and interesting questions that can lead you to want to explore. Curiosity helped Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. achieve great success. Curiosity can lead to innovations, discoveries, and strategies for social justice and peace. A defining moment in young Martin's life that sparked his curiosity was in a shoe store with his father. He was prohibited from purchasing shoes from the white section of the store because of his race. This caused him to question racial segregation and inequality. Reading is a great way to satisfy one's curiosity. Dr. King did not just read books and forget what he read. He took knowledge and inspiration from the books and tried to incorporate the things he had learned from those books into his surroundings. For example, one of his favorite leaders and inspirations was Mahatma Gandhi. He read books about Gandhi standing up and fighting for his rights with peaceful protests. Because of his curiosity and Gandhi's example, Martin led many marches and protests as well. While everyone can access curiosity like Dr. King, they have to develop it. That is why I think curiosity is the best superpower. You do not have to be like Superman and come from planet Krypton to get superpowers, or be bitten by a radioactive spider to get spider-like abilities. Anyone can access the superpower if they recognize its incredible ability and develop the skills to explore critical questions that lead to a dream of peace and a better world.
No, what about Coretta? Coretta's courage. C is for courageous. Miss Coretta Scott King courageously worked alongside Dr. King. O is for organizing. Miss Coretta Scott King organized many civil rights events and the King Foundation after King's death to continue working with civil rights. R is for respect. Miss Coretta Scott King deserves just as much respect as Dr. King. E is for everlasting. Miss Coretta Scott King made an everlasting impact on the world. T and T is for terrific talent. Miss Coretta Scott King was a terrific talent as a civil rights leader. And A is for an amazing woman from Alabama. This spells Coretta's courage.
We bring you welcomes from Cleveland, Ohio. Thank you, Boston, for having us, and I would be remiss because, as you will see, that Dr. King could not do this work by himself. It was a family event. We just talked about Dr. King Jr.'s son giving a presentation, so it was a family affair. So we would be remiss if we did not introduce our fourth member of our wonderful family. In the second row here is Ella and Meldrick's mother, my beautiful partner, Megan Jones Williams. Can you still stand? And I'm gonna be 100, you all. She got us together. We wouldn't be here if she didn't get us together. Thank you. I would like to extend a warm thank you and gratitude to Ms. Victoria for sharing those wonderful words. Also, I would like to congratulate Mr. Nicholas Bates and inviting me here. And I want to have a quick conversation with you all. But before I start, you all, I would like to, and I just saw Miss Kennedy. Miss Kennedy, could you stand up for just a second, Miss Kennedy? Miss Kennedy. Can we give Miss Kennedy a round of applause, you all? Miss Kennedy, we haven't formally met, but Nicholas has told me such great things about you, and I just wanted to thank you personally for all of your hard work and organization for making the Thurman Center what it is in the legacy of Dr. King and Howard Thurman, Sue Thurman as well. All right, y'all. I came to talk to Boston, AKA Beantown, all right? And this is just the audience that I wanted to see. Because when I was first coming in, the music was playing, and I saw people dancing, moving into their seats and the likes of those things. I want you all to know that this Dr. King and Coretta Scott King is a celebration. I bring you welcomes from my home state of Alabama, but what I would like to do before I get into my short little overview, and then I'm going to bring Brother Nicholas Bates up, I would like to give an acknowledgement of the land that I grew up on, the land that shaped me, as well as the land here. I would like to give an acknowledgement to the Massachusetts and the First Nation, indigenous that are here. We stand on those honorable grounds. I am from Alabama. We call it Bama. And Alabama, you all, stands for clearest of the thicket. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my song because I'm going to encourage you all to find that song. So the clearest of the thicket. And I would like to give an acknowledgement to the 4 major tribes, the Creeks, the Chickasaws, the Cherokee, and the Choctaws. I grew up in those pine cones in Alabama, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I made my way to Cleveland, Ohio, and you'll hear me talk a little bit about Cleveland, Ohio. Dr. King in '63 spent most of his time in that city along with Malcolm X. And Cleveland, Ohio is called Alabama North. So many people migrated from the Great Migration. But Cuyahoga, I would like to give a land acknowledgement to the Iroquois. Because of that river called the Cricket River, Cleveland was established as an industrial hub. Now let's get into what I came to talk about today. I found my song in Gainesville, Alabama, Bertha Williams, and in Epps, Alabama, my grandpa, Nathan Williams, come up in the Black Belt. There was a young man by the name of Burl C. Coleman, known as the country blues singer as Jaybird Coleman. When he was 12 years old, he was plowing in the fields. They called them work songs. And they gave him a harmonica, and he would blow his life in that harmonica. Now, Jaybird Coleman migrated to Birmingham, where I would later be born. My grandfather, Nathan Williams, and my grandmother, Bertha Williams, they migrated to Birmingham. It's called the Magic City. 3 precious minerals make that city what it is. It's iron ore, it's limestone, and it's coal. My granddad would grow up to be a coal miner, remembering them songs that Jaybird Coleman sung in those fields about struggle, about sojourning. My song is never over. And I want you all to understand that your song isn't over. And even in my granddad's last days, I remember my granddad who was in the coal mine. I remember his last breaths. Deacon of First Baptist Church in Graysville. I remember my granddad on the respirator. And here was a life. And I made it a point that I would continue my granddad's song. So this is what we want to talk about, the sojourning song. What does that mean? My dad, youngest of 10 children, Bertha Williams and Nathan Williams. My dad was raised in a 2-home coal miner's house, is that they used to call it. But my granddad remembered those songs he heard as a boy, Jaybird Coleman, that talked about the coal miner life. I want to share one thing about my granddad. He had diabetes. It was one morning he couldn't get his boots on, and I have boots on today to honor my granddad. He used to wear Stacy Adams boots as a deacon. Granddad was sitting down at that table, y'all. I'm telling you this song. My grandmother Bertha seen that the diabetes had ravaged his body. He's sitting there struggling to get his boots on, feet swollen. My grandma Bertha said, Nathan, you can't go down there in that coal mine. Not today. And my granddad said, Bert, we got 10 children here. I got to go. That's the song that I carry in my heart. That's what Dr. King is talking about, that drum major instinct. My granddad lives with me, and I carry his song with me. Now, we're here in the great state of Boston, great city of Boston. Massachusetts, a great state. First thing we did, you all, we're driving from Cleveland. I wanted my kids to find their song. And we're talking about the Niagara movement. And we're moving through New York State. And I wanted my kids just to imagine the songs that were Earl when people made it all the way from that lower belt of Alabama to New York State in Canada. I wanted my kids to see that snow out there and the sacrifice that people made to find their freedom. The second place that we visit first place we visit when we got here was the African Meeting House. We didn't even unload our bags, you all. We went there and we stopped, and our kids got out and we wanted to touch that building. That was the first building, one of the first building, freestanding Baptist churches. I wanted my kids to see that. And I would be remiss that when we talk about songs, I'm here in the city of Boston, and so much work was done by Mariah Stewart, Frederick Douglass, Lord William Garrison, Wendell Phillips. They spoke at that place. I wanted my kids to find that song. So important. Second place we went when we were here in the great city of Boston, we went to the Boston Harbor. It was cold. We were out there. But I wanted my kids to see that because I want them to understand the American contradiction. That at the same time, you had these 13 colonies, and you had Americans standing up in defiance about being taxed and those things and standing up to a British government, but at the same time, they were enslaving individuals. When we understand the paradox of this song, we can find the song of Dr. King. We can hear it in his voice when he talks about the mountaintop. I've been to the mountaintop. I had a chance to look over. We will get there as a people. When he talked about I have a dream, and Nicholas and I are going to talk about the I have a dream, he talks about it in 3 parts. Why is this important? Why is this significant, you all? Is that Dr. King, as well as myself, as well as each and every one of you all, have one of the most powerful things that we can do to navigate this experience. Now, the song just continues. I'm going to say that again, my great Boston people. The song just continues. It doesn't end. Didn't end when my granddad went down in that coal mine, those coal miner songs. And on Sundays when he sung, I'm not worried about my soul. 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 It would be in Birmingham. Those same songs from the field hollers, blue collar people, stood up to Bull Connor as we heard so adamantly. It is the song that we need to continue. Now, I want to leave us with this. We understand that each of us have a voice. Nina Simone, the great singer, artist, activist, had this to say. She said that the human voice is the greatest instrument. The human voice is the greatest instrument. And when we listen to Dr. King, when we listen to Fannie Lou Hamer, when we listen to Mariah Stewart, and let me go back and give Mariah Stewart her props. She was the first black woman to give a public address that could have cost her life. That's how much she believed in freedom. It would be remiss for me to let that go in vain. You all have a program, most of you. Now, I told you all about my song. I'm going to end my song, but I want y'all to turn that program around. You'll see a quote. If you don't have it, that's okay. Y'all just hum along with us. Can we all read that quote? This is going to be our song for the day. Are y'all ready? Let's do it. When our words fail, we're going to continue with our acts. That's that Sojourning song, you all. That's the Sojourning song in the 1980s. My mom, who was a child care worker, and you all will hear this, I come from a legacy of teachers. My mom was an early childhood educator. And I'll never forget a cold, chilly day in Birmingham, 1980. And my mom said, "You're not going to school today." I said, "Mom, it's a regular day. We need to go to school." She said, "It's Dr. King's birthday." 1980, y'all. We know that Coretta with the push, and as my daughter said, you all, Ella, named after Ella Baker, the great civil rights activist. Coretta, Sister Coretta, pushed for that day to be a federal holiday that we're here. My mother kept us out. And it takes those small acts of singing. And what the Alabama school system did, it was so many kids being out, they called it a teacher's work day. But it kept going on. That song kept going on. And we get a song that we talk about with Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder said, "Songs in the key of life." And then he comes back with that, "Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you." Can we sing it together, you all? Let's go, let's go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Thank you. You sound so lovely, Boston. Sound lovely. I think we're in the third abolitionist movement. Here in Boston, there's no greater city with the abolitionist movement. And we know what that sparked. That sparked the Civil War. That sparked the 14th, 15th, and the 13th Amendments. We know that the second abolitionist movement, what we call the Second Reconstruction, because America failed on its promise with the first one. We come from the hometown. We come from the home state of John Bingham, who wrote the 14th Amendment. It's interesting, y'all, that history never ends; it just continues. And as history continues, our voices have to keep singing. We have to keep singing. Dr. King's song is alive and well in us today. Y'all did something to get here. Look out there, it's cold, it's snowing, and y'all made it an effort to be here. And I appreciate that, because we're going to keep that song moving along for this third abolitionist movement. And like so many times, I don't want you to feel dejected. It's a lot of stuff to go on. We may not get to see the work that we are going to do and the things that we're going to change. But know that we are going to sing and lift those voices. I thank you. And I would like to have Brother Nicholas Bates join me. Thank you very much.
So I'm somehow supposed to ask like a question. After all, I promise y'all, I can't sing. I don't play any instruments, at least not on stage in front of all these people. I would get nervous. It's an honor to have you here and speak to our theme, but also share this wonderful connection with music, and to highlight the experiences of blue-collar and working-class families. This theme is really important. You all see images. The image on the screen right now is highlighting the Poor People's Campaign. So this particular speech was delivered a few months before Dr. King's assassination at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference at one of their annual retreats in preparation for the Poor People's Campaign. So when Dr. Williams says that King was not finished, unfortunately his life was taken from him and taken from us before he could embark on the significant pieces of the Poor People's Campaign. His work still continues in us. And so some of those images you see on the screen were chosen intentionally to honor that. I want to ask you this question, Dr. Williams. I'm going to start here. There are many MLK Day celebrations across the world, and some are different than others. There are many that choose the most prominent public intellectual who often has one of those like New York Times bestsellers that's a coffee table book, that is someone who isn't exactly a representative of the communities that they're speaking for. So for you, in choosing this moniker, this name, this title of Blue Collar Scholar, I want to know, what does that mean for you? And additionally, in your bio that Gloria read so eloquently, there was a piece that said activist academic, and I noted that activist was placed before academic. I was wondering, could you speak to those two things and how Dr. King has shaped those for you?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Bates, for sharing that. One of the things I would talk about is how I was raised. I grew up in Graysville, Alabama. Graysville, Alabama was also known before it, small little sleepy town, 12 miles from Birmingham, as Gin Town. So it's the only small little city that had where people came, what they call settling up. And this blue collar ethic that I got is just from seeing the people that I lived around. My grandmother, Martha Rayhill, my mother's mother, she talked about my grandfather, Joe Lyons, being a sharecropper in the black belt of Alabama. And she talks about a day where she was a little girl and she went to the settling place. They called it settling up, the sharecropper. And my granddad could read and write. And my grandpa Lyons, the store owner, as we know with the sharecropping, you would have to pay for the land, rent the land. You would also have to pay for the tools and those things. And the store owner wanted to give my grandfather about a quarter of what his crops was worth. And my grandfather refused. My grandmother says she was about 8 years old when she saw that exchange. And the store owner told my grandfather, he used a derogatory term, but he told my granddad that they're coming to get him. Everybody knew what that was in Black Belt, Alabama. Coming to get you mean that your body could be found probably later in the Tom Bigsley River. So my grandmother goes back home and she's very afraid for her father. And she talks about the experience of my grandfather, Joe Lyons, having to be on his porch and stay up all night to try to protect his kids and go out in the fields. So when you ask me about blue collar, it's more of a lineage. It's more of the sacrifice and the struggle that my family has made from the black belt to Birmingham. My dad was a iron worker, and that's who I am. And that's, that's what runs through my veins. So the blue collar is basically honoring the lineage. And every time I come into a classroom, that be Cleveland, Boston, Milwaukee, I always want to sound like my grandmama, my grandpa. And my students, they laugh at me. They say, Professor D, man, you really country. And I said, that's exactly what I want to intend, because that's the voice of my folks. And I want to keep it that way. The activists. That's really important. My daughter is named after, again, Ella Baker, the great organizer. And I love what the poet said about organizing and those things like science fiction and those things. And Ella Baker worked with Dr. King. and it was the chief architect of the largest youth movement, what we'll talk about a little bit later, SNCC, all those pioneers, Diane Nash, Stokely Carmichael, John Lewis. So the activist is always going to go first. And the blue collar, I go back to the activist, where I got that from is Patricia Hill Collins, who I just absolutely love. Her and Bell Hooks influenced my work, and Patricia Hill Collins was the 100th president at the American Sociology Association. And she said one of the most radical things that an activist in education could do is teach at a community college. So I heard that, and I said, I got to call Professor Collins. So I got in contact with Professor Collins. I said, Professor Collins, did you say this quote? I just wanted to make sure. And she said, yeah, that sounds like me. So that I took that call at the community college. And at the community college level, I'm with the students that are like me. I wasn't set to go to college. I was set to go into, and I would have been okay with that, I was set to go into the iron mill. My dad worked at American Cast Iron Pipe Company. I spent some summers there. And I was never selected if you went back to go to college. So for me to be in college and for me to see students that looked like me, students that had to navigate first generation, community colleges are first contacts for black students of color more than any other institutions out of the K through 12. So it just was natural for me to go there and be that. And I think that my work is to be that type of activist education. Blue collar scholar also comes from Carter G. Woodson. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who is the founder of Negro History Week, which we'll celebrate next month, that turned into Black History Heritage Month. Reason why Carter G. Woodson is at the center of my pedagogy is that Carter G. Woodson based his work on teaching. And that's, again, the root I come from. My aunts, my cousin, my younger baby sister, Christy, who's watching. She's taught kindergarten in Birmingham for 20 years, following that legacy of my mom. So Carter G. Woodson, who worked as a coal miner and have this thing of teaching, to deliver the teaching. That's the most important thing. So that's kind of the blue-collar scholar, activist, academic.
All right. There are these wonderful pieces read by Meldrick and Ella at the beginning. This amazing piece on superpowers. I'd never heard of it framed this way. My superpower is something that everybody can access. And when we tend to talk about superpowers, we tend to think about superpowers as these things that are not accessible to us, as these things that make us seem ordinary, like there's no magic in what we do. This piece is a speech that Howard Thurman does, and he talks about, whenever I feel myself getting low, I think about the magic of breathing, how my body does it on its own, that I don't even have to do anything. It just is. It happens. And so there's this piece about superpowers, and then this wonderful piece that is read by Ella about Mrs. Coretta Scott King to be included. And I love how how they look at all of these elements that make up Dr. King, not just teachers, but all of these other elements that make him so incredible. And they also acknowledge how there are other people that contribute to the journey or the song, to use your theme, of Martin Luther King. Why do you think it was important for them to highlight that? And then this piece for you is that you kind of allude to, we can't study Martin Luther King Jr. in isolation. So why those things are important? Because you mentioned a lot of names that I hope people are writing down or taking mental notes. And if you're not familiar with these people, I hope you go and research these people.
Yes, that's a really deep, profound question, to talk a little bit about the curiosity and how the kids came up with their piece. Megan, my partner, and I, we have conversation when we sit down and eat. So we're eating and we're thinking about these things, and you know, Mildred is a curious person. So one of the books that he read about the life and times of Dr. King. And one of the things, you all, is that when we look back at our youth, you can plant a seed in a youth that may not grow for a long time, and you may not see that growth. Now, I want to give my props to Miss Catherine Billingsley, because that photo that y'all saw, I was a 4-year-old getting in front of an audience and speaking like like the kids. And Catherine Billingsley mentored and helped me find my song and those things. Some other great, wonderful women, Miss Janie Welch, Miss Lavinia Jones. All of these women helped me learn that song. So with Dr. King, there's something that planted the seed, and this connects us to Howard Thurman. When he was a young boy, he was always in the library, and there was a famous, a woman that isn't famous. I hope someone write a book. There's not a book on her. Her name was Annie McFitters, and Miss McFitters was the first black librarian in Atlanta, Auburn. And guess who she came in contact with? A young Dr. King. And she tells this funny story. And she said he was a little bitty guy, and he would prop up on the circulation desk. And she would play this game with him. She said, "What's on your mind, Martin?" And he'd say, "Oh, nothing in particularity." And that would be their way of signaling that Martin had learned a new word. So she sparked that curiosity. Same thing happens to me. My Aunt Minnie, who is one of the 10 kids of my dad's siblings, she comes down to Alabama and she has a sweatshirt on. And the sweatshirt is a Dr. King I Have a Dream speech. And it has the whole long speech on the back of it. And everywhere she went, I just was studying them words and following them words. I said, Aunt Minnie. And she lived up north. I said, Aunt Minnie. And this was the time our young people, this was in the 80s, time where you just couldn't click and get an image shirt. You had to be in the location. So if you weren't in D.C., you didn't get the shirt. So my aunt got it. So my aunt surprised me. She didn't tell me she was going to leave it. She left it with my grandmother, Bertha Williams. And I wore that sweatshirt. It's navy blue. I wore the image and the words off. And those words captivated me, you all. Those words stuck with me. I have a dream, deeply rooted in the American dream. They stayed with me. So one program, we celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King, and I said to my mom and dad, I said, Mom, I want to do the entire Dr. King I Have a Dream speech. My mama looked at me, and my dad said, boy, you can't say all them big words, and we ain't going to put you up there, and you ain't going to say all them big words. I said, Mom, Dad, I can do it. So I get up there, y'all, and I do the speech. My grandmother is calling all of the siblings and said, you know that boy got up there? And that boy was saying all them big Dr. King words. That's how my grandmama said. I was so proud of my baby. But that stuck with me, and words moved to work. I started to understand what those words meant. And this is getting to Dr. King, what you're talking about, Mr. Bates, is that the I Have a Dream, although I was attracted to the words and really the chorus, we know that the I Have a Dream speech was what we call a speech that Dr. King went around. He went around in Detroit, C.L. Franklin, Aretha Franklin's father's church, and he gave it in a small town in North Carolina where my Aunt May lives, my grandmother's daughter, in Rocky Mount. So he had this I Have a Dream kind of, it was more like a chorus. And when he got up to speak, Mahalia Jackson, when we're talking about singing, Mahalia Jackson, song to King, counsel King. And she said, Martin, tell him about the dream. And that's when he started going into the dream, y'all. That wasn't planned. He broke script. But for us to move beyond that dream, and that's how I move beyond the dream, is that we got to listen to all three parts of the song, Dr. King's song of I Have a Dream. It's incredibly entitled that, you all, but it works out of three-speech structure. Now, I talked about Mariah Stewart. Mariah Stewart comes from the legacy of what they call the Black Jeremiah. The Black Jeremiah, you all, has a task to speak on behalf of the conditions of the oppressed. 3 parts. First part, you look at a distinctive origin or originality of what is deemed the promise. So that's the first thing. So you look at the promise of that America, right? All people shall have inalienable rights. So that's what we call the first act. Dr. King does that, you all. He quotes Abraham Lincoln, 4 scores, and he's laying that out. So the Jeremiah talks a little bit about what was promised. The second part of a Jeremiah is that they critique the current system as it's not upholding those values that was promised. That's what Dr. King is doing in his second stanza of I Have a Dream. He lays out the first, right? American, this beacon of democracy, but the Negro languish in poverty. We come to cash a check that has been insufficient funds. So he's calling America on its hypocrisy that we talked about. We came in here, Boston Harbor, African meeting place. Now the third is the dream. The third part of a Jeremiah is to stand in practice and to talk about the possibility that there's still time. There's still that word HOPE, which centered Dr. King. There's still time to live up to those things. So when we listen to the dream, we're looking at what Dr. King says should happen if we so do the things that are promised in the first and the second. I like to break it down like this, MB. I'm in the city of Boston, you all, and I would be remiss. I'm a person of words, but I like to move words to action. I am here in the hometown of one of my favorite hip-hop musicians. His name is Keith Elam. He goes by the name of the Guru, part of the legendary Gang Starr. Gifted, unlimited rhymes universal. Guru said this. He said, if I wasn't kicking rhymes, I'd be kicking down doors, creating social change and defending the poor. Now, the Guru was from Morehouse. He went to Morehouse from Boston. Why am I telling you all that? Is that his mother, Barbara Elam, was a librarian, you all. She got him to understand the power of words. So the I Have a Dream speech, you all, I started to pick it apart. What is Dr. King talking about? With this faith, I go back to Mississippi. I go back to Alabama. And what Dr. King was saying is that hope. But the hope, you all, that's the chorus, you all. And y'all know any good song, we like the chorus. The chorus gets us in the mood. But if we only listening to the chorus, you all, we miss the lyrics. That's why Gang Starr is important. Those were lyrics, you all. And I connected those to the Dr. King movement and those kind of things. So we have to go back to what Brother Stevie Wonder said, lyrics as life.
Right. There's this wonderful way that you weave in the women of the movement, which is particularly special. 3 years ago, on this MLK Day, in this very same room, under the sort of organizing of Catherine Kennedy and Kenneth Elmore, Ms. Kennedy is the former director of the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground and the first ever paid director of the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground. And President Kenneth Elmore, shall I say now, was the former associate provost and dean of students. There was a celebration of the women of the movement that included a celebration of Aretha Franklin, Coretta Scott King, and Sue Bailey Thurman. And I had the privilege to, help organize some content and research some things for this piece. Spent a lot of time in the archives here at Boston University in the Gottlieb, thanks to wonderful people like Sean Noel, who helped us today as well with some images. and reading some things from Sue Bailey Thurman, getting some things about Coretta Scott King, and reading this interesting work about Aretha Franklin seeing her voice as an instrument. And so when you talk about this idea of song, but also weaving into the women of the movement, how they've been instrumental in bolstering and making sure these movements thrive in so many different ways and layers. Why is that important for you to continue to highlight in your practice? So much so that you even named your daughter after one of the women of the movement.
Absolutely, and I call it, Brother Bates, the Ella effect. That's what I named my dissertation, and it's all about the works of Ella Baker. And it's my daughter, when she gets up, the first thing she wakes up to is a photo of Ella Baker, because I want her to understand the importance of the work that she did. Now, in the other picture is another hometown shero, Angela Davis. And my work is informed by that. Women are at the center of the teaching experience for me. Black women. My mother was my first teacher, staying at home with us and instilling to us who we were as people. My mother was an activist. She went around the small town because she was a young mother. My mother was a mom at 18, and I came along at 20, my mom and dad. And my mom understood community. And that's the thing I want to talk. We need to sing community. That's why I had y'all sing with me, and I'm not singing at you. My mother would go around the community for young women who had children that were still in high school and get their child. My dad did a thing called plus one. He always took another child with him. So it was 4 of us. It's my younger sister, Christy, my younger sister, Shantae, and my older brother, Eddie Jr. And we never were in a house where it was just us. We would show up and there'd be a new child, and Mama, whose child? That's such and such up the street. So my mother used to do that, and I picked up on that. So the Ella effect, and what I wanted to do with the Ella effect is, how can I take those strategies and the things that I learned from First Baptist Church, my mom, my dad, and to do that into mentoring. That's what Thurman did for King. King was an unfinished product when he came here. He had those roots, but it was Boston that cultivated him, you all, that made him who he was, and for him to find the love of his life and those different types of things. So Boston has that significance there. So when we talk about black women and that organizational power, I even want to go further back, because Coretta's mother, Miss Bernice, and Coretta Scott King, y'all, she talks about something very instrumental. If you read her latest biography that she wrote before her passing, she says that when she was 15 years old, her mother and father's house was burned to the ground. And she cried and weeping. She said her dad said, we got to keep moving. And she talked about her dad. But Bernice, Coretta Scott King, Miss King, her mother was a voice coach. That's interesting, you all. And she comes here and crafts her gift of singing. Dr. King, dear mother, who tragically lost her life, singing and playing the Lord's Prayer at Ebenezer Church, where her father, A.D. Williams, before him, his father, actually ministered there. So Miss Alberta was the music director, and she taught Dr. King how to sing. So a lot of us will think that Dr. King gets his lyrical pose, because Dr. King is a beautiful master rhetorician. He gets it from his mother. He gets it from the black women in the church that taught us how Sunday school. I learned how to read from my mother's grace, but also from Sunday school, you all. And I was being taught that at the same time, because you all, I suffer from dyslexia. So words are backwards to me. Still to this day, it takes me a long time to get through something. I read it 3-4 times. So in the K through 12 system, my teachers wrote me off. But it was those black women, Miss Janie Welch, that opened up that Sunday school book. And I ain't trying to get religious on y'all. I'm talking about the institution. Young Williams, you can do it again. We got time. Do it again. Them Easter speeches. Y'all see me go up there. Look, this is what they do, y'all. They just give them to us in February. And they said, okay, you're going to stand there and you're going to do this Easter speech every year. Those practices, you all, they were teaching me my song. And that's the thing that I owe my mother, making me stand up in the kitchen and recite that. If you're going to get up and do that, Dr. King, well, you're going to say it to me 3-4 times. Say this on those things. And I saw that love, you all, in my partner, Megan. As we drive, I'm driving, and Megan there got the speeches and said, y'all go over. She getting them dressed in those kind of things. So it's the women in that organization, and we have to uplift that. We have to uplift that and talk about that. So that's my take on women, black women. I'm nobody without them. Nobody without black women.
So in 1953, there's this guy, right? His name is Howard Washington Thurman. He was brought to Boston University's campus by then President Case to create an interreligious or interfaith worship at Marsh Chapel here at Boston University, which was a traditional Methodist institution and church. He was brought from San Francisco, where he helped co-found the Church for the Fellowship of All People, one of the first recognized and known interracial, interethnic, interfaith churches in this country. You mentioned this guy a lot. There's this book that you and I were talking about earlier, Jesus and the Disinherited, written by Howard Thurman, where he outlines a 5-part sermon, actually, right? When we talked about King working over things several times. Jesus and the Disinherited started as a 5-part sermon called The Significance of Jesus. It also had an earlier name, The Temptations of Jesus. But in it, he is alluding to Jesus as something that we can study as a subject. He also alludes to Jesus as being one of the highest forms and symbols of hope and love. Now, we were talking about what you knew about this book and what you know about what this book meant to Dr. King. And I just wanted you to elaborate on that in the audience, as you alluded to Thurman several times, being a teacher, and what this impact on King could be, right? We also know that Howard Thurman was actually classmates with Martin Luther King's father at Morehouse. And additionally, King's last year here at Boston University was Thurman's first year here at Boston University. So King would sit in the back and take copious notes of some of Howard Thurman's sermons. And there were some jokes from time to time with his friends. They would say, man, King, did you get all of that? And he would go, yeah. And they would turn to each other like, nah, he don't understand. It went over his head. So I really want you to explain a little bit more about what you understand about the connection between the two of those people.
Mm-hmm. So if Ebenezer Baptist Church, the city of Atlanta, gave Dr. King his song, I would say that Mr. Howard Thurman gave him his lyrics. And I want to break that down a little bit. A great debt is owed to Brother Thurman and Sister Sue Thurman. And what I mean by that is that this book here that you're referring to, it is reported by LaRon Bennett, who is a great scholar, was the scholar of Ebony magazine from Chicago, great city of Chicago that we love. And he said that Dr. King carried a copy of this text around with him everywhere. And he would use this as a way of introspective meditation. So not only did he give him this inner peace to go out and do that hard work, and we talking about that blue-collar work, that's that labor work. Dr. King gave his life doing what, you all? Breaking his route and going back to Memphis to help those sanitation strikers. And he uses those things in the labor. But this book is paramount, and Thurman does not get enough credit because, you all, Thurman gave the spiritual foundation, but he also gave the strategy of the civil rights movement. If we look at this thing called social gospel, because I would say that Dr. King's song is a song of social gospel that later turned into black social gospel. We know that the social gospel movement comes out of Washington Gladden, Columbus, Ohio, 2 hours from Cleveland, Washington Gladden. He's one of the first ministers to talk a little bit about it's not just enough to study Christianity based on this kind of intrapersonal, intrapersonal reflection. What about a greater society? And he was one of the first ministers to kind of partner with the labor movement and union. And this is where we begin to see this social gospel take place in the late 1800s. We also see Walter Rushingbush talk a little bit about looking at tying the religious experience to the everyday. Howard Thurman goes on, you all, to implement this black social gospel to look at the racism and look at those different types of things. Dr. King would be an inheritant of this legacy of black social gospel. Some of those great pioneers, Ida B. Wells, Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois. And we can link this all the way up to James Cone's black theology, all the way to Dr. Cornel West, who I learned from, because Dr. West was really the first person that got me to think about music and the reflection of this continuous song. Or Dr. West says that some of our greatest theorists are musicians. So Howard Thurman goes to India in the 1930s. I want us to make these connections, you all. He goes in the 1930s. He's the first black African American to meet Gandhi. He brings those tactics back over. He's influencing King with this type of tactic. This is very important when we talk about the legacy of Howard Thurman in this book. So Thurman gives him his lyrics. Thurman gives him his theoretical. And even when we talk about today, when we look at today, Dr. West, I would say, is the product of Howard Thurman and the work that he has done. So that is the legacy. I never talk about Dr. King without his mentors. We never make it, you all, without our mentors. Mentors are important. I would not be a professor without my mentors. Thank the Lord for mentors. So I see this as this constant play, that Dr. King got his spiritual foundation to understand himself through Howard Thurman. I want to lastly say that Howard Thurman and Dr. King were both grandma boys. I'm a grandma boy twice over, Bertha Williams and Martha Ray Hill. And they talked about their grandmother and they having those experiences. And they also were country boys. Howard Thurman goes into the woods and he meditates and he sees himself not only through the spiritual reflection of being oneness with the tree. He talked about his favorite tree. I had a favorite tree, you all. Growing up in them pine woods of Alabama, and I would sit and meditate and those things. So Howard Thurman, them being country boys and their grandmother shaped by his hands. I want to leave with this last thing about Mr. Thurman. Mr. Thurman said that his grandmother, who shaped him, was enslaved. Mm-hmm. And he said the thing that gave his grandmother hope for her to push that song into him and give him that beautiful song, he said that it was a preacher. Mm-hmm. And the preacher would say every week, would say, you're not a slave or enslaved. You are a child of God. It said that his grandmother lived on those words and she passed those words to him. And that's where he would go into what we call the black social gospel. So all praises to Mr. Thurman for that.
In this book, Thurman asked a fundamental question. I must mention that. He said, what would Jesus say to someone with their back against the wall? That has been our time. I want to leave you if you have anything else that you would like to share with the people, and then we'll continue with the closing pieces of our program.
I would like to say, Boston, you have love from Cleveland by way of Alabama, and I just thank you, wonderful people, and I want to just continue to tell you, keep lifting up Dr. King and Sister Coretta's voice, and we're going to continue to sing and swing and struggle. Thank you.
We will now hear a musical selection titled ETM Congregation, composed and performed by Lemuel Mark, a student at the New England Conservatory. It is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Victoria Sahani. Victoria was appointed Associate Provost for Community and Inclusion and a Professor of Law in the School of Law at Boston University in October 2022. In this role, Victoria helps guide BU's efforts to ensure inclusive excellence of faculty and academic appointees, nurture a positive campus climate, and enhance diversity and inclusion within our academic program. She also provides leadership in implementing two essential pillars of BU's 2030 strategic plan as the university works to enhance the environment and opportunities it affords to all members of our community. This includes a growing portfolio of programs, among them the Target of Opportunity Hiring Program, BU D&I STARS Program, the University Scholars Program, and Faculty and Staff Community Networks, as well as the BU Arts Initiative, the Newberry Center, and the LGBTQIA Center for Faculty and Staff. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Victoria Sahani.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dean Campbell Foster, for that generous introduction. Thank you also to Director Bates and Dr. Williams for that insightful and thought-provoking conversation. As Dean Campbell Foster mentioned, I am Victoria Sahani, Associate Provost for Community and Inclusion here at Boston University. Thank you. On behalf of Provost Morrison, I join with the Dean of Students, the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground, and the Senior Diversity Officer in thanking all of you for being here and holding space with your neighbors as we celebrate and honor the life and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. As Mayor Wu reminded us earlier today, in the speech, A New Sense of Direction, King recommits to his philosophy for mass social change and liberation through nonviolence, even in the face of wars abroad, economic discrimination, and inadequate living conditions, which seems very familiar to us living today. Warning against the temptation of despair, King reignites our energy for change in the face of adversity, saying, quote, "In any social revolution, there are times when the tailwinds of triumph and fulfillment favor us, and other times when strong headwinds of disappointment and setbacks beat against us relentlessly. We must not permit adverse winds to overwhelm us as we journey across life's Atlantic. We must be sustained by energies of courage or engines of courage in spite of the winds. This refusal to be stopped, this courage to be, this determination to go on in spite of, is the hallmark of great movements," end quote. 11 months before he was assassinated, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. expressed these sentiments publicly on television as well. On May 8, 1967, he was interviewed by NBC News anchor Sander Vanacker in Atlanta at the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church. The interview was recorded on color film, and at many points during the conversation, King looks directly into the camera, though he is talking directly to the viewer. If you watch the interview, available freely online, you may sometimes feel like King is looking directly at you, across space and time and history and circumstances, as if to say, this message is still for you, more than half a century later. The work is not complete. King emphasized in his answers to the interviewer's questions that the next phase of the struggle was a struggle for genuine equality, not just personhood and citizenship from a legal perspective. Perhaps King knew even then just how long that new struggle would take. More than half a century later, we are still in that struggle and trying to push forward against the headwinds. King offers a blueprint for success, however, that shows that we are indeed closer to the goal half a century later. He says during the interview, quote, "Integration does not mean giving up everything that has an Afro-American background. I think that certain unique things within any culture and certain cultural patterns, when you get to the process of amalgamation, can really lift the whole culture. And it seems to me that integration at its best is the opportunity to participate in the beauty of diversity," end quote. All of us here in this room and joining via the internet are celebrating the beauty of diversity with our very presence, gathering together in a single place with a common purpose, sharing peace and love. The simplicity of King's message is its power. King knew that the future of the civil rights struggle would not be so stark, not so literally black and white, but every shade in between, as we bring together various cultures, races, genders, creeds, colors, nationalities, religious beliefs, accents, and stories of origin. As we continue to honor, uphold, and build on King's legacy, let our own sense of direction toward a more just future be guided and nourished by our tailwinds of triumph, propelling us toward the resplendent, welcoming beauty of diversity. Thank you.
Please welcome Nicholas Bates back to the stage for the closing of today's program.
All right, so check this out. I'm going to be brief because y'all been here for a while. Somebody clap like, yeah. So the experience of love is either a necessity or a luxury. If it be a luxury, it is expendable. If it be a necessity, then to deny it is to perish. These are the words from Howard Thurman's book, Disciplines of the Spirit. It's the last paragraph, last sentence of the book. At this time, I want to show some love to the folks at these tables at the back over there with all of these cords running through. They're on cameras, all of these different things. SBU Productions, Let's, Nancy, Chris, Phil, Deshaun, Nate as well. Wouldn't be able to do this without those folks. Thank you to the mayor's office. Thank you to the senior diversity office. Thank you to our wonderful students. They have the day off and classes don't even start till Thursday. So they don't even have to be here. So we're happy that they're able to join us. Thank you to you all for coming in. Danielle's backstage, tremendously helpful and core to running this operation. Carla, Amber, all of those wonderful folks. If I said some names and I missed your names, it's because people are ready to get out of the room and I'm so sorry. So I think I said everybody's name. At this time, we're going to end with a sing-along. I want to bring Rosine Lindsley, CFA 23 to the stage to lead our sing-along, and then the show is over. I'm going to get out the way because I don't sing. I told y'all that.
If y'all want to stand up and sing with me, that would be great. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Go ahead, y'all. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, that hour I first believed. Through many dangers, storms, snares. I have already come. This grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we know last days to sing God's praise, than when we first begun. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. All right. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All through the neighborhood, I'm gonna let it shine. All around the neighborhood, I'm gonna let it shine. All around the neighborhood, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing our song, full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing our song, full of the hope that the presence has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Thank you all so much.